And I called her and I said, would you be willing to hire somebody who's completely overqualified for this job? And she said, I don't think we can afford you. And I said, well, here's my number. And I can work it and work 40 hours a week so that I could go back to coaching school. And that's what I did.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show this week. It's Good for Business podcast. And my guest this week is my good friend, Tawnya Dukes from LifeHouse Coaching, and also from B&I. I think you're the sixth B&I person that I've had on the show, Business Networking International. We meet every Thursday. We'll talk about that some other time. Today, we're here to talk about Tawnya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
So we're going to jump right into it. Tell us your entire life story, or just your abbreviated life story, if you'd like.
Life story. Okay. Initially, I was born in Georgia. As a 2-year-old, my parents moved to a tiny little island in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and I lived about the next 12 years there. As a little kid, living in paradise doesn't suck. It was highly informative in the way I would spend the rest of my life. Also, it meant that when I came back to the States as a chubby-faced, red-headed little girl with freckles and a British accent, I didn't exactly fit in. And so that's kind of a little bit of how I have the cadence of my whole life is where did I not exactly fit in and what did I do about that? And, you know, the rest of the story is college and having twins and raising my kids in a little place in Alabama and then going back into the corporate world and trying to fit in there. In a place where, when I was in it, women weren't necessarily welcomed. And I'll never forget the first meeting I went to as a district manager. And I walked into this meeting where there were 50 of us, and there were 6 women in this giant, room, and there were only a few of us. And I remember, again, thinking, do I actually fit here? And realizing that you can fit wherever you want as long as you recognize who you are. And so that's kind of where I got here. I moved to Mississippi to take a position. I didn't think I'd ever stay in Mississippi as long as I have, but I've found a lot to love here. And when I decided to leave the corporate gig and go into business for myself, speaking of B&I was really instrumental in helping me to get to know the community and meet people both in Starkville and in Columbus that have become friends, and some of them even more like family. So
since life in paradise, what a way to just tell your story when you're doing coaching and stuff. You're like, well, it all seems like paradise, and you're like, well, actually. So what did you tell me about your parents a little? How did they get a gig like that, or did they just do it? Did they just up and do it?
Kind of a little bit of both. My dad had been in the Navy, and he worked in sonar systems. And when he left the Navy, he and my mom met in San Diego and moved to Georgia, where he was initially from, and got this gig with RCA. And he actually was one of the people contracted to help run the satellite array on this little island, 7 miles by 1.5 miles, called Grand Turk, which is actually where John Glenn splashed down. And my dad went down about 6 months before my mother and I went down because there was no electricity on the island yet. And so when they put in electricity, we came along behind and lived in this house that was on the edge of the seawall, facing this amazing ocean. And that became home. Ironically enough, when I first went back in 2013, I believe. Yeah, 13. The bedroom that I slept in the whole time in this big old 250-year-old house is now a part of the house has been made into a museum. It's the Turks and Caicos Museum, and my bedroom is the John Glenn room. So it was kind of strange walking around my bedroom, going to visit this place where I grew up, and there's all these pictures of John Glenn hanging on the wall. It was a little surreal.
So when y'all moved out of there, what's the first exact spot that you landed? Was it in Alabama? Or what?
It was in Atlanta.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
A little different.
It is a little different.
And when was that? What time period?
76.
Okay. So Atlanta, Atlanta's a monster now, and it was big. I think it was 2 million people in 1990. It's like 6 million now.
Yeah.
In the 70s, I think it was $1 million, $1.5 million. So
Yeah.
it wasn't small. The airport was rolling. It was doing pretty good. But
yeah, the airport used to be a place we would go to hang out as teenagers and ride the train up and down. But yeah, there were a lot of really cool kind of events in Atlanta at that time. The Atlanta Rhythm Festival was in Chastain Park, and they had every New Year's Light Up Atlanta where you could go downtown, and it was kind of like a mini Times Square. Things I don't think anybody would do today.
Yeah.
It was small enough back then to do a lot.
Yeah, and I lived in Atlanta for a glorious year and a half when my parents split up. Well, my mother's side of the family's all from Atlanta, and most of them are still there. So I get to go once a year and at least get updated on it. It's uninhibited growth.
Yeah.
That's where kudzu comes from. People like, kudzu comes from Vietnam. I'm like, it comes from Atlanta, and Atlanta has grown along with the kudzu. Most people from New Orleans just shake their fist at Atlanta and yell at them because of the football team.
Kudzu is crazy.
Okay, so were you going to go to college? What did you end up doing for work?
I actually went to college and had every intention of becoming a journalist, and I did my internship in Atlanta at WXIA. And was offered a position there. And so I didn't actually finish my bachelor's degree. I took the position, and then I was hired by the news director, and then the GM found out I didn't have a degree, and they rescinded the offer. Oh. By then, my last year of school had already started, and so I went to work, and I started just doing what I could to make money. It took me 40 years to go back to school and get that degree.
My wife's in school now, and we've had 4 guests on here who are business leaders in the community who didn't get their degree and didn't finish it all. And including Scott Ferguson at Financial Concepts was probably the biggest surprise to a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
Where we were like, oh, you're managing $1 billion in assets. And he's like, I've talked with my bigger clients about it. They only care about what you can do.
Right.
And I think, I have 3 teenage girls. One's in college, one's about to be there, and another one right behind her. And that's some of the discussions we've had, is that you're probably 20 years away, I think, between their generation really being in charge and only caring about what you can do. And AI may facilitate some change in
Absolutely.
that too. So it's a little more about, like, now some people have asked me, like, well, you could run the Visit Columbus, or you could go for this job. I'm like, well, I don't actually have a college degree. I didn't finish. I played around for 6 years, and it was a glorious 6 years. And my wife is going back now. She's in her mid-40s, and she's going to be finished at Mississippi State next year. So, for some things it helps. For others, it doesn't matter, your practice.
Well, I remember marketing. When I first went into coaching, I was adamant I wasn't going to do business coaching because I was so burnt out from the corporate gigs, and the executive level just comes with so much kind of BS that I wasn't willing to put myself back in that environment. And actually, a coach of mine said, but you have all that years of experience. Why wouldn't you use that to help people? And it kind of was like when you get hit with the anvil over the head and went, oh, yeah. But I remember marketing kind of steering away from this idea that I had all the MBAs and all the fancy degrees to go along with it, and would sort of speak to 30 years of actual experience, which helped me learn an awful lot. But there was something to going back and finishing. I was in my 60s before I finished. My family made a big deal out of it, and both my kids have upper level degrees, and we all just went and had a big trip, and it was a lot of fun. It was sort of the closing that loop, if you will.
My wife's almost done, and I told her, I'm like, you need to go take one class. It's at Mississippi State. Where you can drive over and just wear a sweatshirt and jeans and walk around campus, so you have that experience.
Yeah.
She had a little bit of it in New Orleans growing up, but again, she stopped just to do the practical life stuff, like actually work and actually make money.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right. So you're starting college, doing marketing. What's your first step? Did you get married immediately, or?
Well, when I left WXIA, I had already been working. I was hired. First, I did my internship, and then I was hired to be a weekend, just plain old reporter out doing the grunt work. So when they rescinded that offer, I had already been working a couple of nights as a bartender, and so that's a gig that made a lot of money. And this is the early mid '80s, and so I just started working and making money. And lo and behold, this nice-looking guy came walking into the bar, and I was working a lunch shift, and we got to talking, and about 2 years later, we got married.
There you go. Were you still in Atlanta when you got married?
I was. He had a business. He was an electrical engineer and was always an entrepreneur for the entirety of our life, or his life. And so it was kind of a surprise. We had just bought a little bar of our own to add to the entrepreneurism, and I got pregnant with twins.
There you go.
And so I got put to bed early, and life had to be figured out along the way, right?
So you had the bar was in Atlanta?
Yeah.
What part of Atlanta were you?
Over in LifeHouse.
Where's that?
It's on the east side.
Okay.
If you're looking at a clock that's 285, it's like at 3 o'clock.
Okay. That's enough help for me. So I'm like, oh, Stone Mountain, Athens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of course, nobody, even unless you live there, you might drive through the east side, but you don't spend too much time there.
No, definitely not.
Everybody's like going down the middle and on the left. I spent some formative time there. I spent during the Olympics when they told everybody to leave in 1996. It worked out great for me because I was staying in Buckhead. And like the first day I could like take the train and ride my bike everywhere because everybody left to a fault. Mm-hmm. And the town was actually kind of slow because so many people left. And that's probably where somebody had the idea to start Airbnb because
right.
Because everybody was renting out their houses and stuff.
Yeah, I actually graduated from high school in Conyers, which is right off I-20 on the east side.
Back in the day.
In the day.
So what's the next step in your version of your life story there? So.
In my version, so the kids were about 3.5, 4 years old, and my husband decided, I guess it was the first Desert Storm. The company was doing well as a small motor repair shop, and he was kind of strapped for cash. And when all of these companies that had, a significant amount of their electric motors were lined up to go, everybody sort of buckled down. And he didn't think he could make it, and he sold the company and agreed to work for a year for the company that he sold it to. It was probably the worst year of our marriage, that year where he was working for somebody else, because he was just one of those people who was built to work for himself. And when we finished that year, he wanted to move back to where he grew up, which is in the Fort Payne, Alabama area. And so we moved there. It seemed like a good place to raise the kids. And it turned out that it was a very good place for the kids. The next piece of my story gets a little harder because after we had been together for 18 years, my husband got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he died 10 weeks later on my kid's 15th birthday. And so life got a little complicated following that.
Was that in the mid-90s then? Or?
That was in 2003.
Oh, okay, 2003.
2003. My kids graduated from high school in 2006.
Something that's tougher for the younger generation to realize is the just absolutely drastic difference in colon, pancreatic cancer, every cancer, breast cancer especially, but from 1993 to 2003 and 2003 to 2023,
huge.
They're not even the same thing. My dad was one of the last people in the state of Louisiana. He had prostate cancer where they went through with a little bitty knife, and the guy after him got laser stuff like a month later. You know what I mean? Like, and then I know the difference is that it's so much of a breakthrough in, I think, 98 to 2005, and then after 2005. So we've learned that with my wife's breast cancer, that like you hear these stories from back then, and it's red
scary.
death, chemo, very, they definitely didn't pick it up as soon either.
My mom had breast cancer and had a radical mastectomy, and I mean, it was disfiguring to say the least. And I have one of my dearest friends is a 10-year survivor now. And, just the difference in 40 years ago versus 10 years ago is significant.
Yeah, it makes me feel, I just turned 50, it makes me feel slightly older. And it's a weird reference, but the cancer, the price of a 2-liter Coke and cancer, pretty much the standard of two things. Well, that's what I mean, like you said, before 2000, when they were doing the double mastectomy, they weren't thinking cosmetically after a lot of it. It was just get it out of there, it's saving your life. And then if you're going to get implants, that's something you do. But implants were still such a risk back, even in 2000. And same with prostate and some of these other cancers now. If you're getting checked out, now that's the problem with men, is get us to go to the doctor to find out the truth,
Right.
You're like, we'll just wait till my stomach falls out, and then we'll do it. So I'm getting all my 50-year-old checkups now.
Those are fun. Those are
Yeah, I
fun.
guess so. You meet new people. Let's say so.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do things go from there? 2003, right?
Yeah. I had these two really smart, bright, overachieving sons. And, Fort Payne was a little pond. So
Fort Payne, for the record, everybody, foothills, sort of, but it's any town, USA.
It is. It's also the home of the band, Alabama. So there was some of that was a part of their mix. But they were twins in a relatively small high school, and so everybody kind of knew who they were. And I watched within 6 months' time of their dad dying. One of my sons had quit all the sports that he was playing, and my other son was just angry at the world all the time. And I had a decent job. I was running a single department store at the time, and I realized what little life insurance money that I had would be better put to use in me finding out how to help these two kids. So I left work. We went through some therapy and we did some things, but for the most part, I think the biggest difference was just that they knew where I was every day. And so I say that my retirement was those 2 years that I didn't work, and I just focused on my kids. And they ended up doing very well and going on to college, and both, graduating and doing well. And so I don't regret that decision, but it did sort of kind of put a halt to my own progression for a little while.
Well, I've mentioned it on the podcast before. I may have mentioned in B&I, but the most impactful study or quote from a study I ever heard was that the most important thing that, they studied, I think 50,000 kids. It wasn't the Framingham Heart Study, but it was another study based in England. And it was England, France, the United States, the Western countries, 50,000 kids over 50 years. And I think it ended in 2018. And the number one correlation of success wasn't family, money, and it was by tenfold, was that you spent time, read, and played with your kids from age birth to 9.
Yeah.
That was it. And I remember hearing that. And then I've also heard the phrase of once your kids leave their house, you have a grand total of 1 year with them.
Yeah.
And I heard both of those in the same week. And I remember thinking, I've moved my entire schedule around. I'm like, I'm going to go to work. My kids will never eat breakfast with me, but they will see me every afternoon at soccer.
Yeah.
And now that my oldest daughter's at college, she came back the first time and it was emotional, her coming back from college first time. And then after 10 hours, I was like, yeah, I get Allison, I love you. But I get it. I did I got my time in. I did enough of the visits. I didn't have too many. Probably when they're really young, they had a lot of stuff they missed out on. But from 6 to 18, they've all seen me a lot, and we've been around a lot and been very intentional with them, not going out at night, that sort of thing. So that's why I tell people a lot, especially my wife's battle with breast cancer. It's hard to get me to go out at night. I really just want to be sitting on the couch with my wife and kids. Yeah. And so I'm glad you got to take that
Life
time out.
It's really precious, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's good if you can realize it before it's too late, because I know plenty of people, especially in the days before YouTube and podcasts and communication, where that wasn't even, there was no pressure of the work-life balance.
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time, people's version of work-life balance is their own. Quit trying to think that yours is, I got to spend this much time with my kids, because part of is I have to work. I need to get some work in so they can go to space camp.
Right.
Because that's a crazy opportunity that all my kids got to go to.
Yeah, mine too.
I didn't dream about it or care about it at all when I was a kid, because I think it was so inconceivable.
Yeah.
I never went to regular camp. Didn't cross my mind. So so going to space camp wasn't a dream. But when I dropped them off to it, I'm like, man, I'm successful. I've exposed them to an opportunity, and
absolutely, yeah.
It's been good, and it's very good to be intentional with that. So I have friends who are homesteading friends, and I have other ones that are sending their kids to private school, and they're doing every sport in the world and everywhere in between, and just not trying to think somebody else's pressure is pretty important. And
for sure,
that comes up in coaching all the time.
Absolutely. My sons are grown men now, and I will never regret every band concert that I went to, every ball game, all the things that they did, because that becomes the substance of your life, is how you lived it through your children. And then as they become older, how you connect with your grandchildren, and to what degree you learn to be their friend and still their parent. And that's an interesting thing that you have to do. Nobody ever tells you when you have children that the attachment that you have to them, the overwhelming sense of love that you have when they're 6 months old, and teeny tiny humans never goes away. And my kids are 37, and I still feel the same attachment and worry and pride and all the things that I did when they were little teeny tiny humans. But you have to be the one as the parent to let them go and just take all that stuff that you will miss out on and tuck it away somewhere so that you can build a new and different relationship that is respectful to them and their lives and their boundaries. And it doesn't get easy, but it again, it's one of those things where it's the substance of life that makes it all worthwhile, are those moments that you have with those people that you love.
Well, we've been lucky. My wife grew up in both New York and New Orleans. I grew up in New Orleans and a little bit in Atlanta. So we were big city folks when we came here after Katrina. And one of our goals with the kids was we wanted to see if they could at least stay at the same school the whole time, or at least not 20 different schools and move 20 times. So they've moved quite a bit, and have the best education opportunities possible. So the hardest part of when my oldest daughter, who is more of the dance cheerleading type, came up like a week after the Mississippi School for Math and Science application was due, and she's like, I'm going to go ahead and apply. And I'm like, well, it's too late. And I mean, the minute she said that, we were dropping her off the station wagon, pulling away from the dorm because they live there.
Yeah.
And we kind of got over that, and we're dealing with that, even though she lived there for 2 years. And then this year, she left for Ole Miss the same weekend her sister went to MSMS, and we were just like, it's just us and one baby now, and the youngest one, Julie's, taking full advantage of it because the refrigerator's generally empty, as they've noted to us, but she's got her treats, and she knows how to blink her eyes and get anything she wants.
And why wouldn't she?
Yeah, why not? What else are you doing?
Exactly.
Yeah, I heard again, back to another podcast, I heard this guy Brian Buffini, and this was like 12 or 13 years ago, and thank God I heard the quote, but he was quoting Jim Rohn, the personal development guy, and he said, he's like, if excellence is ever within your arm's reach, make sure you share it with your family. And he meant for all kind of stuff, but he really meant for performances, concert, music, that sort of stuff. So, and he was referencing Adele. He's like, I don't particularly like Adele, but she was playing in San Diego. She just won her first Grammy. And so I made sure all my kids went. We got the behind the scenes thing. And I thought of that. And the very first thing I thought of was like, which is different, but Drew Brees and the Saints were finishing the season up in Tennessee.
Nice.
Playing football. And this was 2019. Mm-hmm. So we went up there, had a whole weekend, got the girls matching jackets, all this stuff. My wife had just we bought tickets, got diagnosed with cancer. It was like a big emotional weekend. And then the next year's COVID, and then Drew Brees retired.
Wow.
And he's the greatest quarterback in the history of my team. And my kids got to see him.
Sure.
Like, and they're girls, and they're not all three of them are super football fans, but same thing. And right now I'm dealing with that with my daughter's at Ole Miss, and there's some reason in the college football playoffs, and I'm like,
isn't that strange?
And I'm like,
and then the whole Lane Kiffin mess, and all of that
I
stuff.
knew that was coming. I told my
yeah.
daughter, I'm like, you can just tell by looking at him, this guy's going to break your heart. So.
Yeah. Well, we have to be Alabama fans in my family. Both my kids got their undergrad at UAB, and one of my sons played football at UAB, so it is a requirement that we roll Tide, so that's been a lot of fun for me. I mean, being one of the college moms sitting up in the stands watching your kid play football is both the most terrifying thing ever as you watch these giant humans beat up on each other, and also a strange sense of exhilarating. When you were talking about taking your kids to concerts and taking them to things, it reminded me of, I guess my sons were in high school, and one of my sons, who was a drummer and played guitar and big musician, we were both Nickelback fans, and I say that with a great deal of reticence right now.
I don't have the button for the groan. That's always the funny thing about Nickelback is how they're actually good, but people it just became a kicking dog to kick,
Yeah, but we went to a concert in Huntsville together, and it's a smaller venue, and we had general seating, which I didn't know at the time because I was already an old woman, that general seating meant you're going to stand your tail down there by the stage and fight to see anything. Well, my sons are both tall people, and this son is 6'5", and so at one point he just piggybacked me so I could see what was going on, and I had that moment, some of those moments that just stick in your head for whatever strange reason. I have that moment in my head of being piggyback on my son, watching Chad Kroeger at the end of the stage and both of us jumping up and down with this band and thinking, I will never forget this moment as a parent, like this thing that I did with my kid. And ended up, we went to a bunch of concerts together and had a good time doing that.
Yeah, my Allison's getting the oldest one in college, getting used to going to more stuff, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
like my kids have a pretty good run. Like they did make Taylor Swift, and then Lana
Nice.
Del Rey, who's Taylor Swift's favorite person, played in Brandon for some reason.
Oh, that
And the
is
tickets
interesting.
were, I mean, the tickets were insane. And I called in, as funny as a Telegucha, a B&I friend, and I remember I'd seen her down there before for other concerts, and I was like, don't you run the charity thing? Can I? Like, this is the favor. I'm like, whatever I need to do. And she
Right.
got it. We had floor seats. And
That's so cool.
again, it was me and three other dads. And two of the dads had driven from Texas. And we're standing in the back, and the rest of it's just high school girls screaming their head off. But, like, she doesn't play a show with less than 15,000 people, and she's
Wow.
there at the Brandon Amphitheater, you know?
That is strange.
So it was good. But same thing. I have every memory of that day. I could smell it just burnt into my brain.
Absolutely.
You know, what else were you doing? Like,
Yeah.
I do that probably too much. My wife and I talk about, like, we want to have not the gifts for Christmas, but like our house is over decorated and we eat well and stuff. And that I'd rather have those memories and be, as I say, I'd rather spend the $400 there, because in my business, which mostly selling real estate, but is also flipping houses and or just one a year, but of doing like doing rentals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there isn't a week 2 weeks that come up. I think the other day I mentioned that in B&I, like I had a phone call and they're like, it seemed like the worst thing in the world. It was a $1,400 problem, which is a big problem, but I was just like, we have to fix it, right?
Right.
They're like, yeah. So as I say, I make $1,400 mistakes or decisions like,
Sure.
every week.
Yeah.
So yes, am I going to probably get my daughter to the college football playoffs or the Sugar Bowl? Probably, because we got a place to stay and it's $600 and like it's a lot of money. Now we couldn't have done $5,000 Taylor Swift tickets, but
Right.
we did stay on. I had like 5 different, my office looked like a NASA space center, had 2 different laptops and we were logging in all the stuff. And by like 2:00 that day, I gave up and came home and handed my wife my laptop because I had to go show a house. And like 3 minutes later, she's like, got him. I'm like,
How does that happen?
so
Right.
I didn't get to go, but the kids got to go. So
That's exciting.
It's pretty good. So
Yeah, it makes me think of something that I always work on with my clients, and that is everything is just a situation or circumstance. If you recognize that within that circumstance you have choice, if you will take a minute and step back from the emotional response to what happens in that situation and remind yourself that there will be wins and losses within every situation that you have, pains or gains. And within that situation, you also have some resources, whether it's people you know or friends you know or connections you have or money that you had that maybe you didn't. You can make a decision that will serve you just fine within that situation. If you'll look at the wins, the losses, what resources you have, and step away from the feeling you have about it, you make a decision. Accept that you have the resilience and the confidence in yourself or something bigger that it's going to work out on the back end of it. And if it doesn't, you'll figure that out too.
yeah, you've already made it. As I say, you've survived every last thing. And that's what helped me the most. I know you do coaching. That's been the most helpful thing with me over coaching so far is to, number one, I say negative self-talk isn't specific enough to say avoid negative self-talk or speak better about yourself. But the big thing for me is, would you speak to somebody else like that?
Right.
You know, and I mentioned you met Annabelle Davies at our
Yes.
B&I group, and she was on here a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that in there. I said, I would never call you, Annabelle, and say, you're a piece of shit for eating that brownie last night. And
Right.
she's like, well, thank you. And I said, but we say it to ourselves all the time. And,
Right.
and sometimes my biggest thing, somebody asked me, they were interviewing me. I auditioned for Hairspray the musical, and I'm going to be
That's
the mom.
exciting.
I'm going to be the mom, Edna Turnblatt, which is a major part, and I have to dress. It's, I guess, in drag,
Right.
but that's the point of the play,
Right.
the musical. And they said, "What's the point of the play?" I said, "Oh, it's overcoming limiting beliefs."
Right.
And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I talk about limiting beliefs in my life, like just this wall doesn't have to be here is a good example, but like
Right.
you can knock. People ask me all the time in real estate, can I remove this wall? I said, well, it depends how much money you have.
Yes.
And I said, because that's the only limiting belief is if you don't have enough money, I can knock every wall and every building can be knocked down. And that happens a lot with, I can only make this much money or
Yeah.
only have this skill set. It happens to me a lot with resources on money because I had something fundamentally beaten me with a young age that I grew up poor, the second formative part of my life. So then I can't be this, or I don't belong in this room. And I have positive ones like that too, which is not a limiting belief, but like I'm friends with a lot of politicians, but I don't give them money because my dad didn't give them money. So I have a lot of them that have said the same thing to me. Like, you don't want anything from me, but like, we'll have lunch, be best friends, and then you're like, okay, and hand us a list of things we need to do. And you don't go like, hey, could you look into this pothole? I'm like, well, you work for me. I
Yeah.
pay you. So,
Yeah.
Limiting, that's what I was saying about Hairspray, the musical, is about limiting beliefs. Like the mom thinks she shouldn't be outside. The girl thinks she's fat. There's a lot of racial stuff in it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of life. And even though I meditate twice a day and do all kind of things, I run into it
You do.
all the time.
Yep.
Like there's no way I can do this. And I used to, before coaching, have to find a spot where I'd be like, oh, I did it this time.
Yeah.
Or this other real estate agent is doing this, so I can do it. I got to a point here where I was only doing 70 or 80 deals a year. So I was like, I got to find somebody doing 100.
Right.
And then I'd find them, I'm like, okay. And then I did 100. I'm like, okay, then I probably should have found somebody doing 1,000.
Right.
But that's what happened is you have these things in your mind where you're like, no, who can do that here? And there's a bunch of people in our market, in our BNI, in our city who are completely unreasonable.
Right.
I reference him every other show, Ryan Munson, who left to be a stockbroker and open a beard wax emporium. Now he's selling pizza and other stuff. Like just nothing on paper made sense about that other than his spirit and stuff. If you could have run down every prospectus you want and the bank would have been like, this not gonna work. Yeah.
Absolutely. And those limiting beliefs happen because we had an emotional response to something along the way. You were talking about you grew up poor. So there was a lot of emotion tied into what it's like to be poor. And so it's very difficult to get out of that emotional response and turn it into a cognitive one because our brains are wired for negativity. Our brain is out there just trying to keep us safe. And so it feels like if it gives you that negative input that you'll steer yourself back into the same place. And sometimes safe just means whatever's familiar. You talked about the being fat thing. I grew up of being a fat kid. I was a fat adult. I did the thing where I'd lost 50 pounds and I gained 50 pounds and I went back and forth my whole life until I finally got to the heart of the matter for me. I was abused as a child in a way that severely impacted my ability to be okay with myself and my body in particular. And getting through enough therapy, EMDR was actually very helpful for me in that I realized, and I was 55, when I realized I had lived my whole life from the neck up, that I just was me in my head, and I was very unaware of where my body was because it was uncomfortable, and my body reminded me of this abuse, right? So after I kind of put everything together, I realized that I was having this emotional response to this thing that happened when I was 6, and that it was not happening anymore. And so how could I change my perspective about my body? I spent a lot of time working on it. I've gone through a major sort of transformation across the past 4 years. But the biggest part of that is the transformation of not defaulting to that old belief about who I was and what it would mean if I was that much in touch with my body. And so I was able to recognize that my body has gotten me through so many incredible things, and to be grateful for it and to be nurturing of it and to take better care of it and to make sure that I live a healthy lifestyle so that I can do all the things. But living in your body when you haven't been there for 55 years is kind of a tough thing. And you have to set up some systems that allow you to course correct. Like, I was never the sweets girl, but I was the carb girl. So if I am in the kitchen looking for Doritos, I have to say to myself, what do I really need in this moment? Because actually no one in the world needs Doritos, right? So what do I really need? And sometimes maybe it's boredom. Sometimes it's I'm agitated about something or overwhelmed. And you got to get okay with sitting in that feeling and feeling the overwhelm or the agitation until your body is ready to let it go and your brain can be mindful of what is happening at that moment. And then you're okay and you don't need the Doritos anymore. But that arc of allowing ourselves to be run by the trauma response, I hate using the word trauma because it's gotten so used now, but it's the emotional response. And when our body gets stuck in that, we don't know what to do. We're just defaulting to the thing we've always done or have done for so long. But you can do it a different way. It just takes work.
Well, so much of that in coaching, especially when you talk about personal coaching, is not living in the past, like acknowledging the past, go back in time and forgive yourself, talk about it. But we default to it, those negative things, especially the better you're doing, I think, in coaching and personal growth, a lot of times, the more often, like you're just going, everything's fine. And I've found myself like in the car going, why am I stressed out about something? I had a big breakthrough where it was like, I realized the reason my cortisol level at 3 a.m, I wasn't worried about the rentals because nothing, like right now, I've got the same pressure of these bills and these rentals and this stuff as I do at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, at 3 a.m, my blood sugar's dropping because I ate a rocky road at 11 o'clock at night. And once I took that back and stopped eating as late, then I would start sleeping through the night better. And as my wife knows, she knows if she sees me eating after 8 o'clock, like she's like, he's going to wake up every hour and a half on the dot and go pee and be fine, And that's been part of coaching for me. And I know I keep bringing it back to coaching. I like doing that. But is like doing heart breathing or meditation and stuff during the day, even tapping, which is one of the most awkward things in the world to me. And I don't know if it works, but it distracts you from whatever you're feeling, because we attach these little things where like guy cuts you off in traffic and you don't realize that 20 minutes later you're thinking about something stressful. And I'm so good at the meditation stuff now where and my kids think it's funny too, where I'm like, oh, that gives me more time with our children when I had to slam on my brakes or something. So they'll make a little crack about it. Because I'll say that. I'm like, thanks for that time with my children. Because I had to slam on the brakes. But it works good, and you can easily trick yourself into forgetting what you're mad about or not even knowing. So I'll still find that feeling trailing out of my body. I'm like, and I have to go, what am I stressed about? Which is such an interesting human element to go to literally find out that tells you the truth.
Yes,
that you're
absolutely.
like you're feeling some way physically, and your body's like, well, there's got to be something wrong.
That's right.
Which is the too many tigers coming at you, which
Absolutely.
my kid quotes all the times about like, school or pressure from boy or traffic or whatever. We don't really have a delineation in our primate body of that's a tiger, or that's just, I forgot to pay this bill and it's a day late and the piece of paper says they're mad at me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when I learned that the reason we have an acid response is because if that tiger was chasing you and he got a hold of you, that you would taste bitter and he'd spit you back out, and therefore you'd have a better chance at survival. But yeah, the tigers are so huge. They don't even exist, but they're so huge in our head. And yeah, I think that my ability to meditate and be mindful was what got me through the worst grief in my life. And I first heard of the concept of coaching after my husband died, and I began to learn to meditate and to be present and to allow myself to be deeply feeling what is happening at the moment rather than what is in my head. And to your point, when you've done it, I mean, it's been more than 20 years for me. I just need a little nook that's kind of quiet, and I can go into that place where everything feels restorative again. But most people don't want to hear you say, if you would just meditate, things would be better.
Well, it's hard to get into, because like, I've only really been 2.5, 3 years of doing it. It had to be of Jakob Weinstein, who's my coach and my friend, really good friend. And we look back in the past, and the reason he did it is because the one time we had lunch, we were talking about something, and he's like, what do you do when you have problems with stuff? I'm like, well, I kind of think of my mom and my stepfather. My stepfather my mother died with a 35-year AA chip in her pocket, and my stepfather died with 35 years worth of AA chips in his pocket. So he rambled. He went for it, and he probably had 40 different chips. But I do remember them sitting quietly every morning, and they were either reading the Bible or 12 steps or meditating. And like, it's funny how you see these lessons in life. Like, I sit outside and try to get sun in the morning sometimes, except when it's 12 degrees, as it is today. But that's what my dad did. He would just sit out in the sun, and that's what he was doing. That was his version of meditating. Yeah. Let's go real quick back to her. So were you in retail when your husband died?
I was a department store, single store manager when he died. And then I worked my way up into a regional manager position where I was over multiple stores and working in the field.
Okay. So how do you end up in Starkville in Columbus, Mississippi?
The first district position I was offered was in Boise. And I was like, My kids are just in college. I'm not interested in Boise. And the company that I had worked for kind of called me back, and I took a district visual presentation position in Alabama where I was still close to the kids. And when I got offered the next position, I think it was Ohio. And I was like, dude, I'm not interested in being that far away from my kids. And the COO at the time called me. I was actually working at the Coleman store, and he called me and he said, how about Mississippi?
Can you say which store?
At the time, it was the chain Stage Stores owned, and most of the stores around here were Goody stores. And in 2020, I had left the company in 2017, but in 2020, they ended up going under like a lot of companies with COVID. But they offered me Mississippi, and I said, oh, okay, Mississippi. And you know, if you lived in Atlanta, like Georgia people kind of see the Alabama people through their nose, and the Alabama people kind of see the Mississippi through their nose. And I'm like, I'm just going farther and farther, down to the pits of hell, right? And I said, okay, Mississippi, can I live in Tuscaloosa? And he came back and he laughed, and he said, no, you have to go across the state line if you take this Mississippi position. I was like, fine. So I literally drove to New Hope and started looking around for houses. I ended up buying a house in Caledonia because I knew it was close to the base and I could flip it if I ended up taking a different position. And so that was in 2006. And I stayed with the company till 17. So 11 more years after I had stepped away for a minute and was in field management that whole time.
There you go. And how do you get through that and go to coaching?
Well, I said to you, in 2003 is the first time I heard about coaching, right? And I had run across the Martha Beck School of Coaching. And I thought, well, when I finish this 2-year retirement gig that I was on, I might want to do that. And I read a little more about it and realized, oh my God, you have to have all of your shit together before you are able to be a coach. You can't do that. I'm coming out of this grief. My life is an upside down mess. I didn't know which way I was going. And as a 42-year-old person, I started dating again after 20 years. That was the most bizarre situation on the planet. And I just thought, oh, I'm not together enough to be a coach. And so I went back in and I fell in love with the part of management that is the growing people part of it. And what I didn't realize is my style of management was always a coaching model. It was always about empowering that other person to recognize what strengths do they have and where do they offset their weaknesses so that they can do amazing things, right? And so I was getting really burnout at the gig, and I started looking around again. And as God, life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, does, they sort of kind of put things in your way when it's your time. And I said to myself, I was driving down the road. I had just dropped a bigwig off at the Memphis airport. And I said, if I could just have a gig that I could work 40 hours a week, and at that point, that would have been part-time because I was generally working 90 hours a week. I was like, if I could work 40 hours a week, I could go back to coaching school. And there was a bunch of road construction, and I was just sort of sitting there, and I opened up Facebook. And a friend of mine had a job in Starkville wanting somebody to manage their medical health clinic. And I thought, maybe me. And I called her and I said, would you be willing to hire somebody who's completely overqualified for this job? And she said, I don't think we can afford you. And I said, well, here's my number. And I can work it and work 40 hours a week so that I could go back to coaching school. And that's what I did. They brought me on. I worked there exactly a year. And I went through coaching school, which at the time was about a 9-month program. Went through accreditation and certification and took the 3-hour test, which is a bear, and kind of never looked back from there.
Oh, good deal. And that was what year was that?
2019 is when I got certified and opened my shingle.
Well, what do they say? Those who can't do teach. And like you've built the perfect resume of paradise and hell to get yourself to the coaching thing, which is probably the biggest criticism I hear, even though, the two coaches I know, Annabelle Davies and Yakov locally, they're both under 40.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part for a lot of people to take is like, oh, they're going, because a lot of people really think that it's like sports coaching.
Exactly.
Where they're like, you're leaning too much on one leg or whatever. Some of it's reassurance. A lot of it's, teaching you to talk to yourself correctly, teaching you to break up your day so you're stopping that spiral. People say, well, I don't know about this whole manifestation thing. I'm like, well, you can talk yourself into having a horrible day.
Absolutely.
But that's much easier to prove than having a great day. Because like, how many times you've been like, not another thing. And now I stop myself. I'm like, I'm not allowing another thing.
Yeah. I'm
like, this deal's falling apart and it's going to open another opportunity both for me. And now I call clients. I'm like, I'm going to cut to the chase. Your deal's dead, but it's going to open up another opportunity that you and I can't even imagine. They're like, oh, thanks.
Yeah. There was a quote, something about, the old adage that when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And that quote always bothered me. And it wasn't until I went through the coaching paradigm and I learned about deep listening and what needed to happen and recognizing situations that I realized, what the crap is wrong with lemons? I like lemons. Yeah. Lemons are good. I don't need to make lemonade. I can just understand that right now what I have are some lemons. What am I going to do about that? And again, recognizing that even in the worst of circumstances, on the other side is tremendous growth and change if you're willing to put yourself in a vulnerable position and learn from it. When I look back at all, because, mid-60s are a little scary, but when I look back at all the experiences that I have had, the ones that stand out in my head are the ones where I grew a lot, where I was kind of, forced in a position where I had to make hard decisions and only have my own sense of confidence or faith in something bigger to get me through. Change is hard. None of us really like it. Our brains especially hate it. But on the other side of that is a lot of potential for amazing things to happen because you were willing to be vulnerable and take a chance for a second.
Yeah, and the coaching, the exponential effect I think it has, and I'm sure it is with other people, but I talk about a lot, like I'm learning my kids are speaking in the most interesting ways now because the funniest part is when like teaching one of them to drive and I heard them in the other room, all three of them making fun of me a couple of weeks ago in a positive way, but they're like, Katie, you almost ran that person over. Now, you would have killed him. I'm not mad. I'm not mad. But if you had killed him, we'd have problems. I'm not mad, though. I'm not mad. Because I don't like, oh, my God, dear God. And then also my daughter, I was in a basketball game, a celebrity, air quotes, for the people in the video, basketball game, and I fell down like on the first play, like literally tripped over myself. And then like later on, I did good at the end. And like we're driving on the way home, and she's like, I just want to say, Dad, like, I'm so proud of you for the way you overcame that and did it. And she's like 13. And I'm like, and then we went to Wendy's. Like she just said it like as if an adult was talking. And my biggest stress point that I had to use coaching has been examples of me worrying about my kids.
Sure.
Whereas I used to just sit there and worry about a real estate deal all the time. You know? And now it's like I'm projecting those things on my kid. And then it always works out the way it's supposed to work out and that sort of thing. And recognizing that those things are working out. Or how many wonderful things have happened. Like somebody, I've had times where somebody didn't show up for a podcast, so the other one went longer, and it was an incredible talk. You know what I mean? I got somebody texting me right now that they're not making the next podcast.
Oh, goodness. So. Well, I think what you're talking about, or what I hear you saying, is that when you allow yourself to have deep curiosity, and rather than judging the situation or defaulting to an assumption, what your kids are hearing is you recognizing that you can be curious, that you can just sort of say, oh, well, within this situation, I just fell on my butt. What can I do now? Well, I can get up and maybe I do it differently now. And our brains want to assess everything, AKA judge. And they want to say, oh, I know who you are based on this or that, or you said this, so that means you're that person. If we can just instead shut our mouths and listen for a second with a sense of curiosity, most of the time we will find out something that surprises us rather than something that proves our old assumptions.
Yeah, and if you have new assumptions and positive affirmations about the day, and then you stop during the day and realize, like, oh, I was here, or like I always say, like, if you got a flat tire, you might meet somebody.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to come off that one little stop. And that's why I try to keep going to events and other things like that, because I'm like, oh, you never know.
You don't.
I went out with a banker, God bless his heart, the other day, and I'm like, they're just going to sell me on this. And he brought this incredibly interesting guy with him who was another banker, and we had all kind of friends in common. And then, like, it rekindled our relationship, not just for banking, but just in general.
Mm-hmm.
He had been through divorce and other stuff, and I was just like, I went, and in the past, I may have been like, I'm not going to go to lunch. I'm going to sit at home, take a nap or something. I was like,
Yeah.
I literally went like, oh, this could present a great opportunity. Went in
Absolutely.
there with clear eyes and an open heart, and it worked great. So,
yeah.
Well, as we're sort of wrapping it up here, tell us about the functional part. How do they find you? What's it called? Where do they Google you? Where's your office? What's a phone number to call or website?
Perfect. The company is called LifeHouse Coaching. I liked that play on words. If you just look up the Google definition of a lighthouse, it speaks to wayfinding, right? When we're sort of lost and we can't see things and we need something to help guide us, that's where lighthouses came in. And when I first started, I was leaning into more life coaching than business coaching. But I found myself more often than not, I would say 60 to 70% of the people I work with are business owners. The rest are human beings who maybe don't love the situations in their life at that moment, or maybe do and just want to make them better. I have an office on Miley Drive in Starkville, and I have an office share in Redwood Business Center in Columbus, where I'm there Tuesday afternoons and all day on Thursdays. And I see a lot of clients virtually. I don't love virtually initially. I love to be in person, but we all had to get over that in 2020 and figure out how to make it our friend. And so that's what I did. I love to see people the first time for a free session and let them just talk out what's going on and see if maybe we happen to be a good fit. So if anybody wants to, they can find me at lifehousecoaching.com. Email is Tawnya, spelled Tawnya, at lifehousecoaching.com. And the best number is my cell number, 434-774-8042. Text me anytime.
I find this I consult with business people a lot, or at least try to help them with marketing or, success or whatever. I find a lot of the times, a lot of people's stress is the difference from their view of themselves or their view as a business person versus others. Like sometimes I'll tell you the smallest thing that ever got me bothered at my office. And this happened like 6 years ago. And you can tell I'm still dealing with
Absolutely.
this as a therapy thing. But somebody said something about the ice machine. They're like, that's because Colin eats all the ice. Like, talk about the weirdest thing. I had never gotten ice out of the freezer, but it bothered me because I'm like, that's not my identity as the guy who would take all the ice and mess it up for everybody else. Like, yeah. I'm not that guy. And like, talk about like such a small thing. It didn't drive me crazy, but when it was a good example for myself and for other people of that doesn't match my identity. So you might have somebody who is, and I don't like throwing out OCD tendencies, but somebody who's super neat at their house and super clean and folds their bed and stuff, and they go to work and their office is a disaster, which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of I fall into that track traditionally of all or nothing. Like the house has got to be perfect, everything's got to be perfect, or it'd just be disaster, which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know you run into that with a lot of business people where
Absolutely.
they're just... it doesn't fit either their perfect home that's messy at the office and it just doesn't correlate, or they have this version of themselves and people have facts have cut away at it, and that's a tough thing. I know that sometimes that tends towards a male personality where like, I don't have the sales, I don't have this, I'm a horrible person.
Well, I also think that a lot of entrepreneurs, people who own or manage small businesses, did so because they were good at the technician part of that. They knew how to do the thing, right? They could fix the HVAC, or they could, kill the roaches or whatever. And so they were doing that often enough for somebody else that they think, you know what, I'm good at this. I can go out and do it on my own. And so they move into ownership and they start a business, and they're still great technicians most of the time, but they may not know or have the skills to be a good manager or owner. And a lot of the times this applies even to professionals. I've worked with veterinarians and eye doctors and, people who go into a business, they end up having a bunch of employees, but they don't have any systems or an awareness of how to manage people and how to make the system work for them, even though they're a great technician at what they do.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure having on here. I know I could talk
Thank
to
you
you for
very
about
much.
4 or 5 hours, but then we may have to get into coaching then. So. Is there anything you want to tell the people out there, the kids on the podcast, just reach out to you when they need
The
to?
only thing I would say is that everybody needs a coach. You don't need to go to your friends and family with all your stuff. You need to go to somebody who doesn't have any skin in the game, who'll be objective, who'll be able to hold up a mirror and say, hey, this is what I see. And so find somebody that you can talk to that helps you work out your situations in a way that makes your life better.
Well, and it's also great, not just because you're hiring somebody, but the most important part of coaching for me has been, and I don't like to quote Dr. Phil, but how is that working out for you?
Yeah.
Is seeing these blockades. And I've had 30 or 40 moments in coaching from different people in personal growth where I've just been like, oh, like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
Like where there's absolutely no those limiting belief that I have has just been, I don't want to say holding you back's too simple, but you've just been talking to yourself wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's good to have people. It's a good part about being it's a good part about coaching is to have somebody there every couple of days telling you that you're awesome.
Yeah.
So you're awesome.
And you're awesome.
Good deal. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Good for Business podcast.
Sounds good.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. My name is Colin Krieger and my day job is real estate. If you're looking to buy or sell, I'd love to talk to you. Or if you just want to sit and talk real estate in a no pressure situation, I'd love to help you. I work with RE/MAX partners in Starkville, Columbus, and West Point, Mississippi. I can help you find an agent anywhere in Mississippi or anywhere in the country. Just reach out to our office at 662-327-7705 or find me anywhere when you type in 662-329-SOLD.